Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me is Phil McKenzie. And Phil, we've suffered long enough. We were looking forward to UFC 241 because it was the oasis in the desert, and now we've drunk our fill. And I gotta be honest, I'm feeling very satiated. I'm feeling pretty good after having watched this card, especially the main card of UFC 241. What are your quick thoughts on it?
This was a great fight card. I mean, pretty much from start to finish. Even the prelims, which were also like good on paper, were good in actuality, and the main card was incredible. It had one legit fight of the year candidate and no low points. I mean, the fights that we thought would be good were great, and even the fight that we didn't think would be good was still pretty damn good.
Brunson-Heinisch was way better than we feared it might be.
Yeah.
Specifically because Derek Brunson remembered how to fight. But we'll talk about that later.
And yeah, it was a great, interesting card. I will say, it wasn't a card where I thought a lot of the fighters, apart from Derek Brunson, really showed their best technical selves. But it was an incredibly gritty card.
Oh, yeah.
It was just like, I think I said this on Twitter, but like fight after fight of guys just, falling behind, digging deep, getting exhausted. Like, it was grueling. I mean, in a good way, but there was no fight in that in that main card which was defined by just like a single momentum, a single line of momentum. Right,
and down into the prelims, Kenny Bermudez, that was a dog fight. Closed Yagos was a fucking crazy dog fight. Everything on the main card pretty much was grueling in one way or another. So why don't we're going to try and cover basically, I'll let you guys know before we start, we're going to talk about the main event. Of course, Stipe Miocic got his revenge and his belt back from Daniel Cormier. He is now the fourth man in UFC history to reclaim the heavyweight title. Nate Diaz and Anthony Pettis had a fight that sort of had me feeling Weidman Rockhold vibes, if that makes sense. I thought Romero Bohashinia was insanely good.
Yes.
Like Romero's Costa's pressure, his improved wrestling defense, his intelligent offense, and Yoel Romero fighting the greatest counter-punching performance of his entire career. Against all of that, Sadiq Youssef and Gabriel Benitez. I think Benitez showed the subtlety, the speed of his counterpunching was a different matter from Shayma Moraes, but he got taken out in an exchange. And Derek Brunson showed the fuck up and took it to Ian Heinisch, a.k.a. Strong Belwas, who, for the first time in his life, made the mistake of cutting his opponent first when it's supposed to be the other way around, and he paid for it. All of that and possibly more on this week's episode. So, the main event, Stipe, DC. Phil, I'm going to let you take it away, man.
So, this was an interesting one going into it because the onus is always on the losing fighter to adapt. And the winning fighter, there's always kind of an expectation that they're pretty much going to do what they did the last time. You can't really improve on success that much.
And I think it's fair to say Daniel Cormier in particular, maybe not the biggest adapter in the world.
No, I mean, I think he is a well-trained fighter. I think people have said that, he didn't adapt between the John Jones fights, and I don't think that's true at all. Like, I think we clearly saw he clearly had a different and much better approach in the rematch, even though he got finished in the rematch and he didn't in the first fight. It made a lot more sense. He avoided the clinch a lot more. He attacked the legs. Like, he punched in, like, he didn't just get himself locked up and leaned on in the same way. Like, it was a much better pressure performance.
Definitely.
I mean, I think in this fight, as in that fight, what really tripped him up wasn't necessarily his approach, much as he said that he should have gone for like takedowns or anything. It was just, you know, the inherent stylistic flaws of him being Daniel Cormier.
Yeah.
I mean, with that being said, what I was genuinely kind of shocked by was in the early going, which was just that Cormier won really easily at the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was expecting, of the many things I might have expected out of this fight, I don't know if I would have expected just Cormier just dominating the first round.
Yeah.
And I think this was a strategic choice from Stipe, in that he was like, okay, I tried basically pouring the volume on this guy in our first fight. You know, I basically exchanged with him and just boxed with him and just tried to push him out of position with punches and, you know, put the pressure on him and force him backwards, all of which makes a lot of sense considering who Cormier is. But it also got him, you know, it meant that he was struggling to avoid clinch exchanges where Cormier was just kind of better.
And he burned a lot of energy very quickly, as you pointed out last week, which he definitely, well, you know, he didn't do here.
Yeah. He didn't do that here.
Yeah.
But when he did that, it turned out to not be good, because we've seen Stipe fight as a back foot boxer, and he did it very well against Verdum, but Verdum is not a subtle pressuring fighter, and it meant that he would just sell out on punches and kicks to get into range, and Stipe was able to counter with sort of increasing ease as time went on.
Yeah.
But Cormier, when it comes to closing distance, he really will not he won't lunge in with a single big punch.
No, he finds
he's always
his range.
going to hand fight his way. Yeah, he's going to hand fight his way into range, and he's also just, you know, he's really fast, and that ability to like attack the lead leg that he picked up against Jones was very useful against Miocic. And so yeah, he just kind of had his way with Miocic early.
Yeah, there was kind of an angle I think we sort of tap danced around on last week's show, where, you know, you were saying, like, I believe you said this, that Miocic would have trouble if Cormier could pressure him, could back him up. And then I said, I'm kind of curious to see what will happen if Miocic does fight a much more passive and reactive fight this time around, rather than trying the intense pressure. Those are basically the two ways he fights, you know? And I think we sort of saw like the difficulties of that approach and the reasons why it might be effective. Like, he had a lot of trouble. Frankly, like, we're going to talk about Diaz Pettis, but if it wasn't for this fight, then I would say Nate Diaz had the most terrible start of the night. But like, Stipe Miocic was in a hole in the first round of this fight. He'd got nothing done. You could argue he got 10-8'd. Like, he did nothing in the first round. He got dominated. But it turns out that passive approach, like, just not giving Cormier all of the exchanges, just limiting them, worked. Cormier also gets tired. And, yeah.
I'm not sure if it worked in kind of because I don't think what he did in the first round particularly pulled a lot of like energy out of Cormier.
No.
I mean, it might have done, but
I think the takedown did. I think that's part of the reason that DC kind of stopped going for them. But
yeah, I too kind of felt like that, in that when afterwards, Cormier was like, "Oh, I just should have kept wrestling him." I just thought, yeah. I don't think you could have done that.
Yeah, and there was also a point in this fight that smacked very heavily of the first John Jones fight, where Miocic got Cormier down, and then Cormier like got that huge wrestling chip on his shoulder and just kept insisting on trying to get the takedown back and burning energy. I think that's always a risk if Cormier doesn't have a big wrestling advantage. If someone can really compete with him in the wrestling, there's a huge risk of that happening. So.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it, I think, in one of my John Jones pieces, but Cormier I think this is the disadvantage of being an incredibly focused person, of being, this whole idea of like the grind of reducing something down to a singular diamond focus. It's can be pretty bad in some ways, because I think, Cormier would get driven into this idea of just, punching, pressure. And then, and like you said, he'd get into wrestling situations and he was just like, oh, it's wrestling time now.
Yeah.
And, there's no sort of, and I think that's really what contributes to him being someone who can train himself between fights to have specific game plans, but to be someone who does not adapt well in the cage at all.
He's way too zeroed in. He's got way too much tunnel vision in the moment to make those strategic decisions.
Yeah, so, I mean, in some ways, I feel like what happened between, like, the first and the second rounds is that Stipe, he was like, well, that back foot thing didn't really work at all. And he just kind of went back to what happened, to the game plan he had in the first fight. It started to look much more like the first fight after that first round.
I will say, I think he went to a little more of a sort of managed exchanging style. He thought a lot more about countering than leading. And he tried to stay behind his jab and did make Cormier come to him a little more. It was a lot more of him punching and then framing off and trying to disengage. Whereas in the first fight, he just kind of collided with Cormier over and over again and really did, like, in that first fight, he approached it the way he approached, like, the JDS rematch or the Overeem fight. Like, he just tried to walk Cormier down and knock him out as the smaller man. And I didn't see him doing that here. I thought he was a lot more careful, was a lot more hand fighting at distance with Cormier rather than crashing into tie-ups, a lot more working behind the jab, and certainly a lot more countering when Cormier committed to his shots. Yeah,
but also notable, that also didn't work.
Right, because Cormier is faster and actually moves his head regularly, even if it's not pretty. And it took Stipe about 3 rounds to realize that Cormier is and always has been incredibly susceptible to body shots.
Right. Did you see, like, the parts where Miocic did specific John Jones things? Like, I thought that was...
What things did he do?
Hand fighting into knees and body kicks.
Yes.
Like, just holding, when they're both just holding hands together. And also he went for the John Jones, clinch break spinning elbow against the cage, like the exact one where he's got the wrist control, he yanks it down, he goes for the spinning elbow.
It's the first time I've ever seen him throw a shoulder shot in the clinch too.
Yeah. I was like, wow, you really wanted to beat this guy, huh?
Yeah. That's a really funny angle, but it did start to work. I mean, this is the trouble, is like, it's still heavyweight, so like Cormier won most of this fight. He genuinely won the vast majority of the rounds in this fight. All of them but the one in which he got knocked out.
I thought, like, Cormier did a really good job. Like, he jabbed much more.
His jab is great, man. It was a key against Volkan Oezdemir, and ever since then I've been noticing it with glee.
Yeah. I mean, the problems were that he's, like, we got to be, like, got to be real. Like, the problem is that he's Daniel Cormier. Like, the strategic adjustments you can make can only come within the confines of who you are, the style that you've built over time.
Yeah.
And, like, his defense is bad. Like, and he's short. Yeah. And it just meant that he had to walk through punches a lot. And and it got through to that point. So when the fourth round started, and I had a few friends over to watch it. It wasn't live because I live in the UK and that would be insane.
Yeah. I also watched it Sunday morning, and personally that's the way to do it.
Yeah. As long as you can avoid the results, it's great. So I got to make some food, have some friends around. It was good shit. And I was as the fourth round started, I was just like, why doesn't he ever, like, why doesn't he just punch him in the body? I don't understand why he doesn't. And then
and that was all he did.
and then Stipe punched him in the body once, and I was like, okay, that was good. But whenever an MMA fighter does something like that, which is slightly out of character, and it works, then they never do it again.
They get scared by the success. Like, that worked too well. Something's up.
Yeah. They're like, I'm going to go back to my previous game, which wasn't really working that well. And then he threw like 13 more. This was also at the same time as I had I don't think it was this round, but I had a friend who was, I also mentioned this on Twitter, I had a friend who was like getting obsessed with checking Tinder whilst the fights were going on. And I was like, watch the fucking fights, they're really good. And he was just like, I'm Stipe Miocic. Which was...
Stipe? Is that a changed pronunciation of the word
swiping,
swipe?
You see.
Yeah, that's... You kicked him out of your house, presumably, for that remark.
He also referred to Paulo Costa as the shoulder of God.
He
was like, if that guy's the soldier of God.
All right, okay.
So yeah, this is the point. Which I should have kicked him out, but I was very full of food.
Lethargy. I was feeling low-G. I couldn't kick a friend out.
But
I agree with your point there. Like, credit to Stipe. He did something that genuinely, this sounds silly, but genuinely, as you indicated, lots of MMA fighters do not do something that works often enough. Like, there is still an MMA obsession with the idea of variety. Like, for example, that was, if I'm thinking of the Yusuf Benitez fight, one of my reasons for thinking that, one of the reasons that was counter to my expectation that Benitez would be maybe a uniquely difficult test for Yusuf, more so than Shayman Moraes, was that, he doesn't throw the same kind of variety that Shayman Moraes does. Moraes is a real 8-point striker, and Benitez has like 3 reliable weapons. But Benitez throws those weapons with variety. Benitez understands that he can change tempo, he can change setup, he can change target, he can change distance, all of these things that will make the same 2 or 3 attacks work. And like a lot of MMA fighters don't grasp that kind of thing. And certainly we see out of a lot of prospects that they run out of ideas, even when things are working. And like, huge credit to Stipe Miocic for getting a body shot to work and realizing that Daniel Cormier could not answer it. He did not know how to defend it. And he was not comfortable enough countering it. He tried a couple times. And then when he started thinking about it, Miocic started to throw the left hook upstairs, put Cormier back on the defensive, and then hit him in the ribs another 4 times. Like, if something works, do it until it stops working. It's a very good practice in fighting. If the opening is there, take advantage. And honestly, it sounds very simple, but Miocic deserves credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, this was another, if Cormier had gone to the body more, would he have, like, maybe he would have found himself on the, on the winning end of the cardio equation, because he waded through, spent a lot of time wading through Miocic's punches and just ending up, like, punching him in the head the whole time. He said himself that he saw that Miocic was getting marked up, and he was like, this is a great idea, I should keep going for this. But yeah, like, and Miocic had said that he had, like, talked with his coaches once about seeing that Cormier was vulnerable to the body, and he thought he might do that. And I was, after the fight, I was just thinking, like,
why?
Okay, you clearly trained obsessively for this fight, hence with all your John Jones wacky shit. You never really seriously considered?
Didn't try it till the 4th round?
Yeah, like,
yeah,
wasn't he? I mean, he's been historically tremendously vulnerable to the body. I mean, Frank Mir hurt him to the body. Anderson Silva hurt him badly to the body. Like, it's there.
That should just be even if someone isn't historically vulnerable, like, if they're super fucking tough and hard to knock out, you should go into the fight planning to hit them in the body. That's the way to go. That's how you hurt tough people. You knock Daniel Cormier out after you hurt him to the body. That's the way to do it.
It was tremendously gritty and very, very a great fight and very impressive. Both guys were very impressive in its own way, but it was also one that very much reminded you of, like, that there is a bar at heavyweight and light heavyweight, and it's not all that high.
Yeah, I would agree. This was very much a heavyweight fight, a realizing what the standards of heavyweight are. Although that being said, we're going to be talking about a welterweight fight next, which maybe had a similar sense of sort of sloppiness all over the damn place. So, congratulations, Stipe Miocic. You know I'm heartbroken for Daniel Cormier, but it is what it is. When we come back, Nate Diaz versus Anthony Pettis. After that, Paulo Costa versus Yoel Romero. Sadiq Youssef versus Gabriel Benitez. Derek Brunson versus Ian Heinisch. If we have time, Casey Kenny versus Manny Bermudez, Corey Sandhagen versus Rafael Sunsel, and Kyoji Horiguchi lost last weekend. There's so much to cover. I guess I should just say now, before we actually cut to the break, any of the stuff I just mentioned that we don't get to on today's show, look for the Patreon bonus episode for the offcuts coming later this week. So all of that that we can get to after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about the co-main event of UFC 241. Nate Diaz returned after a 3-year layoff to take on Anthony Pettis, who proved that he is still the greatest kickboxer in the UFC when he knocked out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Can I say, because I've already very heavily alluded to it in the first segment of this episode, I thought Nate Diaz looked really, really rusty. And I am only saying rusty because he started to look a lot more like himself by the third round. But particularly with his boxing, Nate Diaz started this fight really rough. What was your take?
I thought that was partially true. I didn't think he looked great. I thought Anthony Pettis looked really good in this fight.
Mm-hmm. I did too.
For Anthony Pettis, again, we gotta contextualize things, within the standards of who people are.
Always.
But he was active in the clinch. He actually fought in the clinch. He punched off clinch breaks. He threw with intentions in combination, and he didn't just spam the 1-2 when he got into punching exchanges.
He really tried to do the evasive footwork thing, too.
Yeah.
He really tried to Josh Thompson, Nate Diaz.
Yeah, but when the evasive footwork didn't work, he didn't, panic and freak out.
No.
He even punched into kicks in close range.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, Anthony Pettis has tended to sort of just get dialed into just throwing the 1-2 when he's in trouble.
It reminded me of the tactics he showed when he dominated Donald Cerrone, actually.
Mm-hmm.
One of his best performances, I think.
Yeah, I thought Nate Diaz did not look particularly great. There's a real tell, which is, I think, distance management. That's the thing which you tend to need to have practice to be good at. You need to be in there, especially distance management under pressure is something which people lose their ability to to really tell how far away people are. And Diaz, he really did end up start to finish in this fight, he just ended up he really couldn't figure out a way to start and keep boxing exchanges without just rushing Pettis into the clinch.
No, the clinch was the saving grace for him, definitely.
Yeah, and beyond that, he got tired really fast.
Yeah,
I think I've mentioned that I think that the Diaz brothers' cardio is probably just a bit overrated in the modern in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and yeah, he got tired really fast. I mean, but tiredness and incredible mental durability are not necessarily the same things. Like, he got tired, but he just kind of plowed through it.
Mm-hmm. But he basically did what he had to resort to in the second Conor McGregor fight.
Yeah, it was like very, very similar. In fact, like in terms of he was, despite all his complaints about wrestlers afterwards, he leaned heavily on the takedowns, leaned heavily on the clinch. Like, I mean, it was a good performance. I mean, I honestly felt like the ref should have stopped the fight in the third round.
Mm-hmm. He had Pettis literally doing a 360 spin, trying to avoid consecutive knees to the face. Yeah. Refs need to be okay with stopping fights, even though the fighters are still technically alive. Yeah, I thought distance management, I agree, is always a huge tell, and that's what really stood out to me, is that, where was Nate's jab in this fight? Where was it? I don't think he landed it more than a couple times, and didn't really throw it all that often either. And I know people were saying they liked his use of the double forearm guard. It was effective against McGregor. But to me, that's a fallback technique. That's okay, I have no choice but to swarm this guy. And maybe I have to give some credit to Showtime. He did force that dynamic. He did take advantage pretty remarkably well of the time that he did get at range to dish out punishment. Just like the Cerrone fight, he didn't fall into the habit he frequently does of just letting his volume wane, waiting for the perfect attack. That was good. Nate was under duress. And I do think it was rustiness more than anything. I think it was just not being in there, because by the third round, we saw more jabs. Something that I definitely noticed was we saw more of Nate initiating with a feint or a jab and then pulling out of range to avoid the counter. That's a big Nate Diaz move, is being able to rock back onto his rear leg and then slide right back into the pocket so he can recounter. There was none of that until the third round of this fight. It was all just bullying forward into the clinch. But, hey, the Nate Diaz clinch, still pretty good. Still an underrated aspect of the Diaz brothers style, I think. There was a graphic before this fight that came up on the UFC broadcast that was a statistical analysis of where they have advantages. And it was at range, and Nate Diaz had a slightly higher rate of his significant strikes landed at that range. And then it was so it was a red number for him, 89% or something like that, compared to 70 something for Pettis. And then clinch, it was 17% for Nate and 24 for Pettis. So they made Pettis his numbers red. And I'm Anthony Pettis is not going to win this in the clinch. That was never going to happen. I don't care what the statistics say. Nate Diaz and Nick are both clinch fighters. So it's good to have that skill in his back pocket. Can we talk about his grappling?
Yeah.
Because he smoked Anthony Pettis on the ground. I don't know. I found that impressive. It wasn't that long ago that Anthony Pettis successfully outwitted and outgrappled Charles Oliveira.
I mean, he kind of did.
Well, he had a much more back and forth ground battle with Oliveira than he did with Nate here. Nate controlled the vast majority of the positions, scored the vast majority of the passes. I don't think he was threatened by a single submission. There was that guillotine attempt that was never secured in the second round, but other than that, it was pretty much Nate having his way.
Yeah, I mean, I did feel like Oliveira mostly just beat Pettis. He was mostly out-grappling Pettis, but then he just, he did his thing of I'm the grappler. And he just shot from his knees directly into a guillotine, just like he did against Lamas. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was, I don't want to downplay it too much that he really fucked Pettis up. And I mean, it also it showed that this was a very smart, savvy decision by Nate Diaz.
Clearly a calculated match to choose.
Yeah, I don't know how many of the top the like actual top welterweights, he's going to be clinch wrestling.
Right. Anthony Pettis is the dude to do that against. What was the last thing I wanted to say? Oh, we talked a little bit last week about late career Nate Diaz's adaptations to the well-known Diaz flaw of kick them in the leg. He fucked Anthony Pettis up with a check. He hit with a check in this fight. He hit him with the Chris Weidman destruction special and broke his foot. So you can definitely still chop down Nate Diaz's legs and hurt him with leg kicks, but you can't be reckless. And I think from the Michael Johnson fight to now, we have seen that. You have to be able to time those shots. You have to play them off of a different threat. You have to get him into those back foot boxing positions where he leaves his leg behind and opens it up. If you just try to throw naked kicks at Nate Diaz's legs, he has actually gotten pretty good at finding a few different ways of either taking that leg out of the way or making you kick him in the shin. So that was good.
I mean, I think I think this might be like, this looked like it might be, and I would hesitate to say anything on the evidence of one fucking fight in 3 years. This looked like it might be just like the next part of Nate Diaz's game, which is like, this is as he's moving into crusty veteran Nate Diaz, because as we've like mentioned before, like when fighters get older, they tend to build games which are based less around speed and more around kind of old man strength and leverage. Mm-hmm. And this kind of looked a bit like that. This looked a bit like, because, distance perception, the ability to just like hang out in the pocket, I think that kind of tends to go a bit. And people just get better at everything. Like their unique strengths tend to kind of fade away slightly, but also their unique weaknesses tend to, like Little Nog and Shogun just becoming much better defensive wrestlers once they were kind of clearly out of their prime. Mm-hmm. And I think, so I think we might be seeing Nate Diaz head into kind of crusty veteran territory here.
Yeah, if he's not already there. Like,
yeah.
I think that's very possible. What is he, 35?
Yeah, with a reasonable amount of miles on the clock.
34.
Like, again, hasn't fought much in recent years, but he's not had easy. He's been fighting for a long time, and it has not been easy fights.
His pro debut was in 2004. So, it's been a pretty remarkably long career. Yeah, I think you're right. But also, like I said, there were ways in which Pettis forced a what may have seemed like a more reckless fight out of Nate, and he certainly incentivized him to press forward as much as possible and force that clinch over and over. And by the third round, when Pettis was really slowed down and was sort of just very willingly backing himself into the fence, and his volume waned, at that point Nate Diaz looked more like Nate Diaz. So I think a little more activity and those basic skills are pretty much still there. And to his benefit, Nate has never been a fighter who has relied on his speed or his reflexes over much anyway, because he's kind of a slow ass. But I would like to see Nate back in another fight. Just do the Conor McGregor fight. Like, just do it. There's no other reason.
I think everyone is now down for the Masvidal one, which again makes a ton of sense for him, because it's totally winnable. It's still a lightweight, welterweight. Yeah, and it's pretty much a title shot, I guess. Should he win it?
I guess.
I mean, I don't think I'm being crazy when I say that either Kamaru Usman or Colby Covington would absolutely fucking buzzsaw Nate Diaz.
Oh, no. No. That's the thing. That's just make him fight the Anthony Pettis, fight Masvidal, and if he wins that, then you just give him McGregor for like the extra special welterweight title or whatever. I just don't need to see Nate Diaz climbing the rankings and proving that he's the right fighter to beat the current metagame of MMA. Like, it's not going to happen. Really strong wrestlers are going to out-wrestle him. Really good kickboxers are going to chew him up at range. Just the fun fights. Do the fun fights. So yeah, Diaz Masvidal or Diaz McGregor 3. I'm 100% down for any of those. Shall we talk about the middleweights, and not the good ones, but the big muscly ones?
You are talking about the matchup of specimens.
The matchup of specimens, the Patrick Wyman Memorial Muscle Dude match of the year. Paulo Costa, Yoel Romero. I think sort of the ideal heading into this was that in a lot of ways, Costa's style was uniquely difficult for Romero. I remember specifically, Phil, on last week's show, you said that there's a lot of, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but there's a lot of wisdom to the idea that against a sort of charge-up fighter like a Robbie Lawler or a Yoel Romero, who sort of likes to wait and calculate and kill you with one devastating blow, the best thing to do is to just get on them and stay on them and make them react on the fly over and over and over again. Do not give them any time to make those calculations. And basically my reasoning was, yeah, that sounds good, but it's Yoel Romero. He's insanely powerful, insanely fast, and seemingly in every fight, he manages to pull out new skills, sometimes whole new skill sets that we've not really seen from him before. So he's one of the most adaptable, and I did not think that Paulo Costa would have either the defense or the durability to play that game well enough to make it to the end of the third round. I basically thought, tough fight for Romero, but Romero's going to knock him out. And honestly, I thought both guys performed incredibly well in this fight. I thought Romero fighting with his back to the fence, defending and countering in the third round. When Romero used to get tired, he would just stop doing anything, but he didn't have the option here, so he jabbed Costa's face off for the better part of the third round. Like, Romero dealing with that pressure like a prime Robbie Lawler would have, like a champion-era Robbie Lawler would have, was incredible. And Paulo Costa, like, he has fought, again, no disrespect, absolute bums in comparison to Romero up to this point. Uriah Hall, Johnny Hendricks, Bang Boj, and Gareth McClellan. Those are his UFC opponents pre-Yoel Romero, who many people believe should be the middleweight champion right now. And the fight was like dead even.
I'm the middleweight champion because he missed weight, but yeah.
Well, right, okay. But who won, many people believe, won his last middleweight title fight. So essentially, skill for skill is right at the top. And is, one of the most physically impressive and mentally impressive fighters in the game. And Paulo Costa, it was a huge step up. And he just took a fight to Yoel Romero for 3 rounds. Incredible.
Yeah. I mean, this was a complete, this was almost I would want to see from Costa.
It's what you want to see?
Yeah, so this was one of those rare fights where you could say, like, here are a bunch of things that Paulo Costa should do, and he did pretty much all of them. Like, every area in which he could improve or he could show a specific tactical, adjustment, he did it.
Yeah.
Like, defense against strikes, moving his head, not just bursting backwards out of range with his double forearm guard up, body work, body punches, body kicks, which we forgot to mention, like, Romero had never dealt tremendously well with.
That's
just
true.
Because he tends to, he tends to catch stuff on his arms and hang out at middle distance a lot. Just an amazing performance from Costa.
Wrestling defense?
Wrestling defense. I mean, just like Romero got in on a deep takedown on him and he just chucked him off.
Yep.
Like scrambling back to his feet when he got taken down. Showed he can go. I mean, in 3 rounds, Romero was really coming on strong at the end of the fight. But I mean, this was an incredible pace. For
pace.
What this fight was.
Yeah, this was like Jacare Weidman, that level of just extremely athletic middleweight slugfest, non-stop violence.
Yeah, I mean, because I would have thought, if Costa had beaten Romero, it would have been because Romero looked old. it would have been because, or because Romero started really slowly and Costa just, buzzsawed him before he got the chance to get into the fight. But honestly, like, Romero started faster than he has, like, since Whittaker won, which was admittedly only, like, a few fights ago. But like, that was one of Romero's fastest starts I've ever seen. He was immediately making reads and attacking right from the beginning.
Yeah, and he maintained that pace better than he has since he fought Derek Brunson.
Yep.
Like, this was 3 rounds of he did not have the option to take his foot off the gas. Paulo Costa knew that his strategy was to let him have no rest, and he really didn't. So I don't know. Like, geez, I'm so overwhelmed by just how much action there was in this fight. Like, what stood out to you tactically or technically? Anything in particular? You mentioned Costa's kicks.
Let me think. I mean, yeah, Costa's body kicks, I think, were really what made the difference for him. I mean, I think if he just tried to, like, punch with Romero, I think he would have ended up getting countered a lot. I think this was a tremendous, like, countering performance from Romero on its own merits, because he threw so many different counters. He countered with the jab, he countered with, like, rear hand hooks, like the left straight, like, it was just, I mean, he threw tons of insane Romero stuff and almost fell over. Like, it was like, I mean, it was classic Romero. There were tons of points where you were just like, what are you doing?
Yeah. What is this 400-pound cat leaping around the octagon? Yeah, I liked Romero. Like, again, I think Romero is already kind of a counter striker. Like, he certainly has the like, mental makeup of a counter striker. He's incredibly patient. He picks up on patterns, and a lot of his volume in most fights is suggested volume, is feinting. But this is not a kind of, he has not had to play a counter fighter's game this purely against an opponent who will not let you come forward. I thought, like, his left hand work was really clever. The jabs were great, but he kept doing this really interesting thing where he would, he'd sort of like Willie Pep it. He'd back off in a southpaw stance, moving off to his left, and then try to dart in with the straight left as Costa came in. But then he kept doing this move where he would do that, and then other times he would throw the jab. He would throw it as a straight left, but fall into an orthodox stance so that his left hand came out like a jab and then fire more punches off of it. That was really impressive too, was Romero's combination punching. Not like until the 3rd round of this fight, he fell in a lot more single strikes, but he was throwing combination counters. It wasn't just the variety, as you pointed out, like that not all of his counters were the same strike, but that he was throwing a variety of punches each time he countered. Uppercuts, left hooks and left straights. There was a bit of body work, although Costa definitely had the advantage with his body work, which honestly, I don't even know if that's an improvement he made for this fight. Like, he's always been a really, studious body puncher. But
yeah, it was the body punching I was expecting, but like his body kicks were just like, they were very, very good. I mean, the thing which still shocks me is that Romero took that punishment to the body. I mean, he did. One thing, he mixed up his round kicks and his snap kicks because, I mean, Romero has a big tendency to like. He's a big tendency to like parry body like snap kicks because he really wants to like do the parry and then just dead the other guy with his. So like Costa did a great job of mixing up the the ones you can parry with the snap kicks with the round kicks. But what is just freakish about Romero is that he took all that body work and outlasted Costa. Yeah. Like he won the clearest and most definitive round of the fight in the 3rd. I mean, his will to win is absolutely incredible.
Insane. And for Romero to be able, like, he must have he certainly had to take the steam off of his attacks. He had to manage his energy a lot more than he normally does. But, like, for Romero to be able to do that, we were just saying before, like, you have to analyze fighters in the context of who they are. Everyone's selection of techniques and tactics is going to be limited by their personality or their character, or however you want to frame it. And, like, just yet again, I know he lost the fight. It was very close. Honestly, I can't find it myself to complain too hard. I gave the last 2 rounds to Romero, but damn, this was an even fight. But like, Romero's defining characteristic is his ability to just do whatever he needs to do, and that is incredible. He's like a true all-terrain fighter. So yeah, Paulo Costa comes up large. Is that what John Anik always says? He always has some silly gambling lingo that I never quite remember. Coming up large in Vegas. Paulo Costa with an incredible step up in competition, and therefore an equally, if not more, even more so incredible win. Yoel Romero with like one of the best performances of his career in answering that very difficult style matchup. A crazy fight. Very good. Let's take another break. When we come back, we are going to cover as much as we can of the following: Sadiq Yusuff versus Gabriel Benitez, Derek Brunson versus Ian Heinisch, Corey Sandhagen versus Rafael Assunção, Casey Kenny versus Manny Bermudez, and Kyoji Horiguchi getting deaded. All of that after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are moving on through the UFC 241 prelims. Which one do we want to start? Oh, not even the prelims yet. My God, this card was stacked. I'm so unused to it. Main card still. Let's talk about our begrudging boy, Lloyd Irvin student Sadiq Yusuff. We did get an opportunity to root for Mowgli in this fight. He came very close to upsetting Yusuff, and this fight it's an MMA specialty, the 1-round classic war. This was, I think, a very fine example of that kind of fight. Lots and lots of momentum swings in the space of like 4 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, this was probably until Romero Costa, this was the best, like, 1 round of the card. Mm-hmm. Got to Romero Costa round 1 where they dropped each other like 3 times.
Yeah, when I was just like cackling and holding my head in my hands and screaming insanely during the first minute of that fight.
Yeah, so Sadiq Yusuff, I mean, how much do we need to talk about this guy's like transformation over his like time in the UFC? Because I think what one of the things we've maybe not mentioned explicitly, although we might have done, is the idea that you need to be very proactive in the modern UFC. Mm-hmm. Like, the era of being a pure single strike counterpuncher, I think, is dead. Like, I don't think that's going to be working anytime soon. Defense in MMA is simply not good enough. But all people have to do is learn to take steam off their punches. Like the Machida, Silva, and even to a lesser extent, like Jose Aldo approach of like, I'm going to wait for you to throw something big is not going to fly that much. And
not as many opponents are coming in and just throwing one big stupid attack anymore. So
yeah. And they can just rack up points. You could rack up points leads with trash. And that's a perfectly legitimate strategy against that particular style. And it kind of looked like Yusuff might be one of those guys when he first came to the UFC. Like, he was in his previous fights, he tended to want to kind of wait and counter and He would use the clinch as a safety zone, all that kind of stuff. In his UFC fights, we have seen a lot more, like, and even though it got him into trouble in this one, we've seen a lot more of him trying to, pick up the initiative.
I think it's been a very good choice specifically against the last two guys he's fought, which is what we've seen. Is like Shayman Moraes and Gabriel Benitez. Yeah, pressure is what beats them. So,
yeah. I mean, he came with a good game plan. He threw a lot of his jab, threw a lot in combination. And what got him into trouble is that I just don't think he was ready for what a sharp and accurate counterpuncher Benitez is.
Benitez's footwork, man, it's really good. Like, he kept finding the inside angle for that straight left hand. As Yusuf was trying to cut him off, he would just sort of do a little bump step over to his left and then shoot right down the pipe with the left hand. And this I loved. Like, the knockdown of Yusuf, it played off of that. Like 5 seconds before that knockdown, Yusuf is pressuring. Benitez backs up to the fence. He bumps to his left and then tries to come on the inside with that left hand. So then Yusuf is walking him down again. He seems wary of that, and Benitez immediately steps outside for the outside angle and throws the left hand right down the pipe after like a blinding jab. He played those two angles off of each other. And that's what I was alluding to before. Like, a variety of strikes is honestly not even close to as important as variety of setups and applications. And Benitez showed, man, like, he has the fundamentals to make the same straight left hand work in a variety of ways. He's certainly has anyone else knocked Sadiq Yusuf down yet?
Not that I know of.
I don't think so.
And yeah, I mean, and he was throwing, the 1-2 much more than he had a tendency to. He really has had a bit of a tendency to be left-hand heavy in the past, but this was, one of his all-round just best performances. Mm-hmm. He just got overconfident. Like, it was when he went for the lead. It was when he decided, I'm going to pressure, and Yusuf went back to his older style. He was just being patient, moving around the outside. That Benitez, I think he fell in love with his left hand a bit.
Yeah,
but it was a very close competitive fight up until that point.
Yeah, crazy exchanges. I loved it. I really, really loved it. Yeah, I thought, like, if you could do it again, the cue for Benitez would probably be like to just play a conditional game plan where when he presses after you, that's when you look to cut your angles and land that left hand down the middle, like a 1-2. What is better for stopping someone walking you down than a 1-2 down the pipe? And when that gets into back off, especially if you hurt him, you just chew him up with kicks. He's back at the range where you have the advantage. Just hit him with all the low kicks in the world. I just think he got a little greedy looking for the left hand, but I don't blame him. Like, Yusuf has looked remarkable in the UFC and in the lead up to it, and he knocked him down and had him badly hurt. He hit him with some big shots after that knockdown too, and it was one perfect punch that put him down. So, incredibly good one-round fight. Sadiq Yusuf is absolutely legit. Gabriel Benitez deserved more credit before this fight, and I suspect he will continue to deserve more credit than he'll get afterwards, but I thought a really strong performance from both guys.
Yeah, definitely, like, a stock up performance from both of them for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Last fight. No, that's actually everything we wanted to touch on this card. Horiguchi. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, Phil. You have to let me segue, please. Can I live?
No.
All right. Well, talk about Kyoji Horiguchi then. He had yet another bantamweight fight against Kai Asakura, was a massive favorite, got knocked out in a minute.
Yeah, that was what happened. I mean, this is, in some ways, these things are encouraging, these, like, big Rise-in one upsets, because it shows you that, like, there are still, like, real quality fighters out there, that this kind of thing of UFC or Bellator or whatever level is a highly mutable concept, that there are many, like, very skilled fighters out there.
Parity is the rule of the sport, man.
Yep. And it also showed like it also showed that like every fight style has its inherent weaknesses. Like even blended styles, like you can blend like two different semi-optimal approaches together. Doesn't necessarily mean you obliterate like the risks of one of them. Like, so Kyoji together with Robert Whittaker is like he's the modern karate boxer, right? Because he can use the blitzing space covering techniques, but he's also like, he's pretty good in the pocket. And it showed that that's still a weak, like, blitzing over tons of space to throw big strikes still has like pretty inherent weaknesses to it. Like, you are taking a large risk if you choose to go for like early exchanges with a giant jumping fucking punch. In like with your rear, I mean, even with your front hand, as Jose Aldo would testify. Like, it's risky.
It turns out that all it really takes is an opponent who is willing to stand there and throw back. And like a lot of fighters with these really dynamic styles, understandably too, like you just get used to the fact that opponents really react to the implication of what might happen to them rather than what's actually happened to them. You start leaping into range and like, yeah, especially as your stock grows, like 90% of people in the first minute are just going to pull away. They don't want to take the chance. But like, what's your contingency if someone just stands their ground and throws a short right hand in the middle of your big leaping combo?
Yeah. I mean, so this was, I mean, Asakura looked very good. From what you could tell.
Short sample size.
He showed tremendous finishing instincts, like very good eyes. You know, it looked like it looked like Horiguchi's first punch was a throwaway. It wasn't really meant to land, but he still parried it anyway. And like, yeah, just showed a ton of accuracy, like step knee to like hit Horiguchi when he was backing up. Like, I mean, for an undefeated fighter with tons of finishes, I mean, what more could you want? I mean, I'm definitely going to be looking to see more from that guy.
Another like funny little parallel to, like obviously the first exchange of this fight was very much like, Aldo McGregor. And I liked how Asakura did what McGregor did to Aldo as well. He baited him with rhythm, which is normally a Kyoji Horiguchi thing. He would kind of just dip into range, you know, this sort of front foot, back foot bouncing stance. Just dip a little bit into range and then pull back a couple feet. And then you dip maybe a half a foot forward and then you pull back a couple feet. And the next time you dip forward, like rule of threes, other guy is going to try to time you and leap in. That's when you throw your counter. He drew the lead out of Horiguchi with his movement. Yeah, all good. And I think the lesson that you stated at the start is the one to take away, that no matter how like current your style may seem, how well it seems to suit the way that your division and your sport is working right now, you are always making yourself vulnerable when you attack somebody, and especially if your game involves leaping across space, you have to be aware of the fact that some people are not going to run away from that. Some people are going to stand their ground and hit you back. So,
yeah, I mean, I did say Asakura was undefeated, but I think he's lost once. But yeah, so it was. I mean, it's a tough loss for the Gooch, but I mean, I think it's the necessary one that I think champions need to come to. Mm-hmm. Is that you can't just obliterate everyone.
Yeah,
like sometimes you're going to get people who are too tough, who are not scared, who are too accurate, who are too powerful. Like sometimes, like Holloway, I think is in the process of making this transformation. Many other champions that we've seen have also made this change. Like you can't just he came out there and he was just like, I'm going to fuck this guy up.
Yeah, because he hasn't been running through everyone, but the problem is that his style has not changed. The way he approaches his opponents has not changed, despite the fact that a lot of his recent fights have been quite tough. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Horiguchi will need to take a different tack against Asakura next time. Not that he wouldn't have still had a chance to knock him out, but yeah, this is the kind of fight you need to happen to remind yourself that, people will figure you out and people are looking to build off of your previous performances in ways that are not good for you if you're a champion. So sad to see. Did you have anything else to say about the Ryzen fights? I didn't actually catch Takeya Mizugaki's fight. I have no hope that he's going to win anymore, and I'm too sad to watch him lose. But I know he got starched as well.
I didn't. Apparently, Justin Scoggins looked great.
Okay,
which
that's good.
I'm glad. Like it's the same as Derek Brunson. I mean, I made like a snarky joke about how he could have at least cheered everyone up by getting himself submitted in a funny way. But like to be honest, I am like it's always good to see someone who's like sabotaged themselves, then like turn it around a bit.
Derek Brunson, come on.
Yeah,
I love a redemption story. I love to see someone learn from their mistakes. So
and Jared Brooks headbutted his way to a no contest
and got really hopping mad about it.
Really mad. He was looking for that 10th fight that he's supposed to. Is 1 in 10 fights that he's supposed to lose by knocking himself out, and he just couldn't make it happen.
He was so pissed. He was like, "Oh, that was my chance.
I've got a statistical average to maintain."
If only I'd gone to a crouch first and leapt head first into his skull. Yeah. Well, next time, Jared. There's always next time. Okay. I think that does it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. A chock full one. Either you just listened to a very long episode, or you missed a couple of the things that we teased, and you will have to head over to the Heavy Hands Patreon for those. Whatever the case, stuff has been posted over there lately. Stuff I think you will enjoy. Of course, I mentioned a couple weeks ago I had Mookie Alexander on to basically have an hour-long discussion about the death of Maxim Dadashev and mortality in combat sports, something I think we should all grapple with if we're going to call ourselves fight fans. Phil and I did our little preview / recap covering the 2 weeks ago's Shevchenko fight and that card, and also previewing some stuff from UFC 241, and it's likely you'll find more stuff there now after this. So it's $3 a month, people. I mean, come on. You can do that for a little bit of free stuff, right? Well, it's not free. For a little bit of stuff that's definitely worth more than $3. So, Phil, before we go, anything to plug? There's no UFC event next weekend, so...
I don't think I've got anything coming out, so we're going to have to see, I guess. I guess we will have the MMA Depressed Us.
Oh, yes, we will. We will have the MMA Depressed Us. And somebody suggested, ironically honoring Derek Brunson by doing a Derek Brunson fight. But honestly, I kind of feel bad. Like, I'm so happy for Derek. I don't want to make fun of him. I really liked that performance, so we'll have to talk about
on the one hand, I do feel like I have to watch Brunson Theodoru again. I mean, admittedly, two guys that I like both of them.
Yeah.
But I still have to watch that again for the Depressed Us. But also, there's the fact that I doubt that Fight Pass will fucking have it up.
No, not for another 3 years at least. But that fight does it sparks joy in my life. So yeah, I'd be willing to watch that again. MMA Depressed Us. I don't know what the hell I'm doing this week, people. But it'll likely be an article about UFC 241. So whether we're talking about Miocic or maybe Costa Romero, or, I mean, there's a lot to choose from. So just keep your eyes peeled on bloodyelbow.com for that this week. I will do my very best to get something out. And if you want to get at us on social media, Twitter is the best place to do that. We're both on there pretty frequently. You may find me arguing with all sorts of people who disagree with my political stances, and you will find Phil on there saying funny things about MMA. And occasionally Tekken. So you can find Phil at Evil Greg Jackson. You can find me at Boxing Bush with a B-U-S-C-H. And until next week, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.